So there has been a lot of talk the past couple of days about analyst predictions for the video game industry and all of the video game companies in 2019, because here we are at the beginning of the year, and of course, it's a perfect time to discuss that stuff. Now, of course, through that, there's also been a lot of conversation about Nintendo and the Switch. What are analysts predicting and saying about Nintendo and the Switch and the future for the console throughout the next year in 2019? And it certainly has been interesting, and there's been a lot of discussions around these analyst predictions, and I've seen a lot of this on YouTube and on Twitter. Recently heard it on IGN's Game Scoop podcast, which I am a huge fan of, and I thought they had a great conversation. I'm having a lot of fun discussing this stuff. And one of the people who's been pretty vocal about some predictions is everyone's favorite analyst, Michael Pachter. And now I'm going to tell you guys, full disclosure, while I rarely agree with Michael Pachter, I don't hate the guy. I know he's a polarizing figure. I know people have strong opinions, especially Nintendo fans, because he pretty regularly has very bad takes when it comes to Nintendo's business and their success and all these different things. Now, I will say I don't think he's truly like a hater, you know, even though I know he has sometimes those weird takes, like I said, about Nintendo or any company that he maybe doesn't have a favorable opinion about. I think he just truly believes the things that he believes, and I think he says them from what he believes is his personal place of knowledge and expertise, because he kind of represents a lot of companies and is definitely an industry insider, you know, if we're giving him fair credit there. And so I don't think he's trying to just be mean when he says kind of the ridiculous things he sometimes does. And I think that's one of the reasons why I can just deal with it. You know, I don't have a lot of cynicism and hate in my heart anymore, man, as a 38-year-old dude. I'm just like, whatever. People say things, I agree, I don't agree. But it's interesting to hear opinions, and he has interesting opinions, even if I don't usually agree with them. I can see it that way. And so, of course, since we're talking about Michael Pachter, that means I'm obviously talking about one of his predictions and his theories, his guesses for Nintendo and the Switch in 2019 is what I wanted to discuss. And I think it's pretty interesting. He's not the first to say this, but he is kind of stating this as something he thinks might happen throughout the year. And I wanted to discuss why I don't agree with it and don't see it being possible. Of course, what we're talking about is the idea of a handheld-only Nintendo Switch, which gets our brains thinking about a lot of different things. And like I said, this has popped up here and there throughout the last 2 years, you know, year and a half or so since the Switch was first launched. You know, would Nintendo ever go this route with the Switch once everyone finally started owning Switches and playing with their Switches and, you know, experiencing different kinds of games and different genres of games? Some people said, hey, does it make sense for Nintendo to eventually just make a handheld-only version? They're traditionally so crazy successful with their handheld market. The Switch is such a cool device. It's so powerful as far as handhelds go, and it's got great games. Imagine if Nintendo could, you know, cut the price down and sell it as a handheld-only sort of competitor to the rest of the industry, and a replacement maybe for the DS line, since that's currently going out with the 3DS. And it's always been an interesting idea, and I think that there's always been merit to it, or at least merit to the conversation about it. And so that brings us to Michael Pachter's quote. Again, this is his quote, or, you know, pseudo-prediction that he put out there about the Nintendo Switch in 2019. My guess is that Nintendo will make the Switch and get rid of the Switch part, so it'll be handheld only. They'll probably just make the Joy-Cons part of the integrated body of the tablet and probably drop the price. Get rid of the docking station and the external power supply. Just turn the thing into a handheld that's rechargeable with a power cord. You know, like a normal handheld, and charge $200 for it. And so, here's the thing. Like I already alluded to, yes, there is merit to this idea, and I could see like a weird alternate timeline where this is something that made sense for Nintendo. But I truly don't think that this is something that they would ever consider doing. I get the idea of Nintendo wanting to have something that truly is a dedicated handheld only. They had so much success with the Game Boy family. They had so much success with the DS family. I mean, part of the reason they're having success with the Switch right now is because it operates as a handheld. So clearly that's a market and a gaming device that Nintendo understands, and so making a replacement for that makes a lot of sense. But the problem is it doesn't make sense for the Switch. The main reason to me is it's obvious, and Michael Pachter even touched on it in his quote. It's because you lose the thing that makes it unique, and it's the fact that it does both. Just a dedicated handheld right now, where the 3DS is going away and no one really has their eyes or their minds or their thoughts on the idea of a dedicated handheld that isn't their mobile phone, I don't think that that has any sort of place in people's minds, and no one is interested in that. The Switch works because people can look at it as a home console first that has this cool extra benefit of being a handheld. I mean, that hybrid nature is the X factor. And so if you were to release something like a Switch at, $200, even at $150, that doesn't do the hybrid thing and also turn into a home console and dock into your TV or plug into your TV, it suddenly becomes just a really expensive PSP or a Vita, or even what people now perceive the 3DS to be, an old, outdated, uninteresting piece of technology that's a dedicated handheld that takes up the same space that my phone does in my pocket, and I'm not interested in that. I don't want that. The reason the Switch works right now with its portability is because most people, I think, see it as a home console first, and when they decide to take that thing with them, they're not thinking, oh, I'm replacing my phone or my PSP or my 3DS with this thing. They're thinking, I get to take my home console with me. Of course, that might not be everybody, so if you're somebody who sees it as a handheld first, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I know that some people do, but I think when you look at the wide swath of gamers and even the more casual people and the older folks that are buying it because of the novelty of it, the 25 million people, a lot of them, I think, are looking at it that way. I get to take my home console experience with me, not I have a handheld that's $200. And so I know I'm not blowing anyone's mind with this theory, but I think that breaking the model that is the Switch, breaking it down and destroying that idea by making a handheld-only version, it doesn't work. And it's the same reason why these rumors about a Switch Pro or a docked-only Pro, something where there might be some games that you can't play handheld mode, stuff like that. I also don't think that has a chance of being successful and probably isn't real, because that breaks the Switch model in the opposite direction by making it not handheld at all. I mean, it's crystal clear. It's so black and white obvious. The Switch's success hinges on the hybrid nature. It's got to be able to do both. That's what's interesting about it, let alone the Joy-Cons. And again, Michael Pachter touched on this, and many people have as well, not just him, that you would also have to make Joy-Cons that don't separate from the device. And suddenly, it's like, well, now you're breaking another aspect of the console, which also means you're restricting a few games. There are probably going to be more than a handful of games that you wouldn't even be able to play because it would be a handheld only, and you wouldn't be able to take the Joy-Cons off. It's just basically, a Nintendo PSP, as silly as that sounds, and it's just not going to make sense. And I think that Nintendo knows this. Now, while I am starting to believe that there is some real possible truth to the idea of an upgraded Switch or a Switch Pro, I wasn't so sure for a while, but I'm starting to believe in it more and more. The thing is, I don't think that what Nintendo is going to do with that is remove the hybrid nature and make it a handheld only or a docked, console only. I mean, think about it. If Nintendo were to make a handheld only, like I said, that's just like a PSP, which is no longer really successful or interesting. And if they made a docked only, then it's just a regular console. And are they going to be able to continue to compete with the likes of Sony and Microsoft coming out with the PS5 and a next Xbox in a year? I mean, probably not, because then it's just another home console box plugged into your TV. And I think that if Nintendo were to do that with a brand new console and they introduce the successor to the Switch and it's just a regular home console, sure, they could make that thing successful. But morphing the current Switch, the thing that everyone bought into and has been so excited about and loving for the last year and a half, turning that into something that's just a box plugged into your TV or just a handheld in your pocket, I just don't see it working, and I think Nintendo knows that. They'd be limiting the use of their Joy-Con, they'd be limiting the ability to play a couple of games, and suddenly Nintendo's not doing the unique thing. I mean, the Switch is such a great example of Nintendo's innovation and uniqueness shining through and making them successful. Just like what happened with the Nintendo Wii and the original DS model when that changed the way we looked at handheld gaming and many things in the past. When they did a weird controller with this weird analog stick on the Nintendo 64. I mean, these were crazy ideas at their respective times, and those were the very reasons Nintendo saw success and sold hardware and software and introduced innovative ideas that changed gaming forever. And so while I do see where the idea of a handheld-only Switch comes from, and I do see what Michael Pachter was saying, I just can't believe in this idea, mostly because I don't believe Nintendo would do this, I mean, there is something to Nintendo releasing a dedicated only handheld that would be a successor to the 3DS. Don't get me wrong. That might be something that they're planning in the next year, 2, 3 years. Eventually, I mean, I've honestly theorized in the past that once we get through the Switch generation and we move on to the next thing, that Nintendo might split their market back up like they used to and have a handheld only and a home console only. I mean, that really might happen. I just don't think that it's about breaking what the Switch does currently. But again, the thing is, when you think about Nintendo going handheld only, do they want to continue to compete only in the mobile market? I just don't know if they want to. I mean, yes, they've shown that they can be successful in a mobile-focused world with the 3DS and even the 2DS, you know? They have been successful there, but I think that if we go a couple of years where the Switch exists and there's no dedicated handheld, trying to reintroduce a new dedicated handheld against a mobile market seems like a foolish task, in my opinion. And it's another reason why Nintendo wouldn't take the Switch and make it a handheld only, because right now, I mean, the Switch combats the mobile only by being able to plug into a TV, and it combats the console only by being able to be taken handheld on the go. It just all feeds itself. It was such a brilliant, perfect idea at the perfect time. It's lightning in a bottle for like the 10th time for Nintendo. They're so good at doing this. Obviously, they make missteps. The Virtual Boy, the Wii U. We get it. We all know that they make mistakes and they miscalculate sometimes. Sure, they're not perfect. They're humans. They're a company. But in general, they tend to capture lightning in a bottle over and over again, man. I mean, they're never going to be doomed. Nintendo's never going to be doomed. I mean, that's not the conversation I'm having, but I guess I had to bring that up at the end here. So that's what's going on. Those are the predictions, the theories. That's what Michael Pachter said, and now you know why I think that that's a crazy thought. And Nintendo, I mean, I'm going to say 99%, because if I say 100%, then it'll happen and I'll look like a fool. So I'm going to say 99%, it's not going to happen. They're not going to release a handheld-only Nintendo Switch. That's my prediction in theory, and I guess we'll see what happens this year if I'm proven right or if Michael Pachter is proven right. And even if it does happen and Pachter's right and this thing does come out, I'm not going to lie, I'll be curious to see what it's like, and I'll be curious to see how the market and the consumer and the gamers respond to it. Is it a great product? Do people actually say this is what we want and they buy it in droves? And I mean, I certainly wouldn't be sad if that happened, but I just don't see this going down. So tell me what you guys think about this idea. That is all for me. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Ro2R, and I'll catch you next time on another video.